and so forth, right? So this way in which there's like this family kind of a relationship between the Philistine and the Israelite king, right? So again, just I think the Bible is constantly playing with the instability of these alliances, right? That we think, oh, the Philistine can never be loyal to Israel. On the contrary, right here we have Ittai, the Gittite, being loyal in the way that the Moabite Ruth is loyal to Naomi. All right, so they go right, and then we learn that right that David doesn't want the Ark of the Covenant with him, right? He wants to leave it in Jerusalem so that it'll be there upon his return, or he won't return because God no longer wants him, right? And this is Alter will make a big deal of David's newfound humility in the next chapter, right? But I think it's here also, right? He's sort of saying, look, if God still wants me, then I will come back to Jerusalem. I don't need the Ark of the Covenant to be with me. And if God really is, really has willed this usurpation and wants Absalom to take over from me, right, then I will just accept that, right? Very, very, very interesting, I think, right? And so they go, right? And then finally, we see Hushai, right? Where David goes up to the mount, right? And this word Rosh, right? Alter makes a big deal of this word Rosh because it, like the word Avar, the passing over, Rosh happens again and again. And Rosh has so many meanings, including the mount, right? But it also, of course, means the Rosh of the Rosh of, it means his head, right? And so he has his head uncovered, and then he and it also Rosh, like in a lot of languages, says Alter, also can mean the political head. So David has sort of lost the head. He's been usurped by his son. And here, right, we learn that Achitophel, right here, Achitophel is among the conspirators, right? And so, what does he say here? Vayomer David, sakelna et atzat Achitophel Adonai, right? So turn the counsel of Achitophel into foolishness, right? And Alter translates that slightly differently, if I recall. He says, thwart, pray. He says, thwart the counsel of Achitophel. Right? And then so Hushai, the Archite, came to meet him, right? And David convinces him to be a secret agent, right? To go and to make it up with Absalom, right? He says, if thou return to the city and say unto Absalom, I will be thy servant, as I have been thy father's servant in time past, so will I now become thy servant. Then wilt thou defeat for me the counsel of Achitophel, right? So this is foreshadowing, right? We're beginning to get a sense, right, that David, despite his fatigue, despite his sort of inability to be the David of old, right, he's beginning to regain some of his wiliness, right, some of his ability to be sly, and so this is where we end up, right? Vayavo Hushai, right? So Hushai is Hushai Re'eh David, right? David's friend, right? Came into the city, right? And Avshalom was at that point, right? Also coming in to Jerusalem. So the two, Hushai and Avshalom, come into the city at the same time. All right, so that sets the stage for chapter 16. All right, so that's our background. That just that the point of that was to sort of catch us up in the story. All right, so of what you read for today, starting with chapter 16, what are your thoughts? Give me your impressions, because we haven't had a meeting for a while, so I don't know if you've had a chance to read all this stuff or if you're just catching up. But so tell me where you are and your thoughts about David and Absalom. And now of course I want to read Faulkner. Makes
I actually read that.
Faulkner makes it sound really interesting.
I read Absalom
Exactly. Yeah.
in my 20s, and I
Okay.
know what it referred to, but
Yeah.
it's a difficult book, to put it lightly.
So thoughts?
I read this chapter, but so long ago I don't remember a thing about it. So
Yeah, that's the problem with taking a couple of weeks off. But Mondays, unfortunately, were not great days for.
Can I say something?
Please.
Rabbi Jim?
Yeah, go ahead.
Rabbi Jim?
Yes, go ahead.
So David was king of Israel. Who was king of Judah?
He was actually the king of Judah. Remember, this was before there was one king at this point. So David
was king of Israel and Judah?
Right. He was king of the combined monarchies, right? They won't split up until after the reign of Solomon, which will happen later in the Book of Kings, but not at the beginning of the Book of Kings. All right. So, Jody, you want to say something?
Well, as far as this chapter is concerned, I was just absolutely astonished at all the sexual the sex was used.
Yes.
In a way that just astonishes me, and sort of to revenge, is that the word that I'm looking for in a way? He was to have sex publicly.
Right.
I
amazing. Yes.
Yes. I'm sorry. I feel like a teenager.
It's fine. It's fine. No, it's very interesting how the Bible is so. The Bible can be so matter of fact about this. And people who consider themselves focused, sort of faithful to the Bible are often very uncomfortable with things sexual, right? But the Bible itself is just very forthright. Sex here is clearly transactional, right? There's nothing here about affection. There's nothing here even about lust, right? It's power.
Oh, well. What do we say now?
I don't know, but no, it's very disturbing. I completely agree with you. But it gives you a sense, right, of Achitophel, right? That he is very dispassionate, right? This is his advice, right? Is for Avshalom, right, to go and have sex with all of his father's concubines. Why? Because that will send a very clear signal, right, that he has taken his father's place, and that there is no way for them after that act. There's no way for them to to have a rapprochement, which is really interesting, right? Because as we will see in chapter 18, right, David is so concerned about his son Absalom, and you get this sense of David is really being no longer, in a sense, the ruthless, cutthroat person that he was. That he has this sort of, at least while Absalom was alive, right? He has this kind of, he has this sort of weakness almost, right? That he can't quite stomach the break with his son. And so you see, we see this in chapter 18, right, where the guy that comes and reports to Joab, right, that Absalom has been caught up in that tree, right, and Joab is like, why didn't you kill him? I would have given you, I would have given you this and that and the other thing. And the guy's like, I heard the king. Everybody heard the king. The king doesn't want Absalom dead, right? And Joab is like, okay, yeah, you're right. But Joab knows that if Absalom lives, right, then the civil war, there will be a civil war, right, ongoing. So, there's a similar ruthlessness, right? This sort of sense that violence somehow becomes the answer to this sort of I'm just thinking that there's a similar ruthlessness there, right? Right, that we're going to use sex, right, to score political points, and then we're going to use violence, right, to settle this political battle. And it's disturbing, right? On the other hand, this also feels to me like it's the way humans are, right? That this is a very human story. Go ahead, Connie.
The concubines were David's property,
Right.
and that's part of it.
Yeah. Right.
Is that the only way that they could express themselves? Or was that so? It just seems to me that it's so primitive.
Yeah. It feels almost atavistic, right? I mean, it feels like, I don't want to insult gorillas. Like, I don't know if gorillas actually do this, but or maybe it's elephants. It's like some sort of other mammal, right? Where the males sort of clash over over having control over the females. Who's going to be the alpha, right?
Right.
Ways that happens, right, is in physical battle. Another way that happens, right, is that who is having sex with the women, right, with the females.
But is this sort of in a way it's a little mythical, because even though all in the commentary says that, well, Absalom had a reputation of being quite a
looker,
punk or whatever.
Hunk.
Alpha.
He's a hunk.
An alpha man.
An alpha. He is an alpha, right?
Yeah, but so that I wondered if there wasn't a they're always finding numbers that are thousands of people when they really only probably had 200 or something. And I'm wondering if they just didn't inflate.
Right. I mean, it's possible that it's inflated. It's also possible, right, that you're right, that there is a kind of a mythical element to this, right? That Absalom is in fact some sort of a sexual Superman, who can bed 10 women in an afternoon. I mean, it's, you know, uh, I mean, you know, far be it from me to say anything more about that, you know. So, anyway, other thoughts? All right, good. Well, let's continue with chapter 16, and we'll get as far as we can get. All right, so there's a couple of different parts here, right? The first one is that we see Ziba, right, who is the servant of Mephibosheth. Now, Mephibosheth, as you'll remember, is the son. Oh, wait a second. I need to share this with you, otherwise you won't be able to see it.
Right.
There we go. So Ziba is the servant of Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth is the son of Jonathan, right? So he's the remaining figure in the house of Saul, right? And Ziba, right, seems, according to Alter, right, Ziba seems to be betraying his master here. He's brought up all of these provisions for the king, right? But then he says, right, that today, he says, behold, Mephibosheth abides at Jerusalem, for he said, today will the house of Israel restore me the kingdom of my father, right? Which seems very unlikely, right? But David doesn't seem to care. Either he doesn't care or he doesn't notice that Ziba is being deceptive, right? And so the king says, right, everything will be yours, right? You will inherit everything of Mephibosheth's, and he will no longer be, because he's according to you, he's given over his loyalty to Absalom, even though there's no, as Alter points out, right, there's no indication that that's the case. Go ahead, Ellen.
Was Saul king before David?
Sure was. And then, right, this is one of the most interesting passages for me, at least. And when David came to Bahurim, and that's a village, somewhere on the way to the Jordan, right? There came out from there a man of the family of the house of Saul. His name was Shimei, son of Gera, and he came out and he kept cursing as he came, right? And he cast stones at David, right? I mean, this is really, really crazy behavior, right? He's casting stones at the king, and he's casting stones at all the servants of the king, and all of the people that were there, right? And Shimei said when he cursed, "Begone, begone, thou man of blood and base fellow. The Lord hath returned upon thee all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose stead thou hast reigned. And the Lord hath delivered the kingdom into the hand of Absalom thy son. And behold, thou art taken in thine own mischief, because thou art a man of blood." Right? So you basically have brought this upon yourself. Right? And this is really remarkable, right? That this guy would come out and curse the king this way, because and here we have Abishai, right? Abishai, the son of Zeruiah. This is Joab's brother, right? And we already know what a effective killer Joab is, and Abishai is not much difference, right? He wants to cut off his head, right? And again, here's this word head, right? This word head comes up again, and the king says, why do I have to deal with you? Like, I don't feel like dealing with you, Abishai, his son. Let him curse me, because Adonai hath said unto him, curse David. Who then shall say, wherefore hast thou done so? Right? Very, very interesting. He basically seems to be acknowledging, and this is what Alter says, right? That David seems to really understand at some level how much he's brought this on himself. Even if Shimei right, is saying, you caused the death of the house of Saul, right? Even though everyone has made clear, right? David has made clear, the narrator has made it clear, everyone has made it clear, right? That David himself did not kill Saul or Jonathan, right? The cause of all this, trouble, the reason that the Lord has brought curses upon David, right, has to do with not with Saul, right, but with Uriah, right, Bathsheba's husband. But somehow David recognizes, right, that this has happened, and this has happened at least in part because of my own actions. So I am not here, even though in the past, right, David would just let Abishai cut off the guy's head, right? There wouldn't be any question. But so look here, right? He says, behold, my son, who came forth from my body, seeks my life. So how much more this Benjaminite? I mean, like, if my son wants to kill me, what do I care if this other guy is just like cursing me out? He's not going to do anything to me. He's just going to curse me out because, I've got all my people with me, right? So let him alone and let him curse, right? Let him do what he wants. Because why? Because God told him to, right? And it may be ulai, yireh Adonai, right? And maybe God will look, right? Maybe God will see on my eye, be'enai, and be'eni, right, into my eye, beheshiv Adonai li tova, tachet kalalato hayom hazeh, right? And perhaps, right, the Lord will return to me for good, right? Will requite me for good, right? Heshiv, right, is from the root shuv, like teshuva, right? Returning, atoning. Maybe God will change God's mind, right? Because I just acknowledge that I've done bad and maybe I deserve this guy's curse, right? Maybe not for what he's cursing me for, but maybe I deserve it. And maybe something good will come out of it, right? So really, really fascinating, right? All right, so now we shift gears. Yeah, go ahead, Connie. Connie.
I was thinking it took a lot of either. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. It took a lot of either stupidity or courage to go after David, surrounded by his whole retinue.
Seriously, right? I mean, can you imagine? I mean, with these guys that are all probably carrying, spears and swords and whatever. I mean, he's tossing rocks, and I mean, it just feels like he's poking the bear. I mean, it's
so desolate.
Yeah. But I mean, you can just sort of imagine the anger, right? He's so angry that in a sense, he doesn't even care, right?
Yes, I meant desperate, not desolate.
Right.
Desperate, right.
And so interesting that David's reaction is right along with his, right? That it's like, oh yeah, this guy is off his rocker. He's, like, why should we bother with him? So fascinating. All right. So now we return to Jerusalem, right? And we see that Achitophel is with Absalom in Jerusalem, right? And again, right, Vayahi ka'asher ba Hushai, ha'arki re'eh David, right? He is the friend of David, right? All right, and so the narrator is going to remind us of this. No, Alter points out, right, that Re'eh David, right, is like a court title. It's like a companion or something like this. It's not just a buddy, right? But it is interesting, right, that it means, in this case, it means friend. And Absalom understands it, right, that way, right? So he shows up to Absalom, and Hushai says to him, Yehi HaMelech, Yehi HaMelech, right? So long live the king, long live the king. So Hushai is saying to Absalom, you're the king, right? And Absalom, right, is suspicious. I think reasonably, right? Ze chastecha et reecha? Is this your kindness to your friend? Are you betraying your friend David? Lama lo halachta et reecha? Why did you not go with your buddy David? Right? Why didn't you go with him? Right? And Hushai says, no. Why would I go? Right? The one that the Lord has chosen, the one that the people of Israel have chosen. That's the one that I will be with. Right? Alter points out that he's being cunning here. Right? He doesn't say I'm going to be with Absalom. He just says I'm going to be with the one that the Lord chose. Right? Which is a little different. Right. And he goes, whom should I serve? Right. Whom should I serve? Should I not halo lifnei vino? Right. I was a servant of the Father. The Father is gone. So I should serve the Son. Ka'asher avadati lifnei avicha ken ehye lefanecha, right? Just the way that I served your father, so I will serve you. And then we get this very important. This is the scene that so disturbed Dodi, right? Achitophel is asked by Avshalom, what should we do? Right? And what does he say? He says, Bo el pilagshe avicha. Go to the concubines of your house, of your father, right? And all Israel will hear that thou art abhorred of thy father. Right? Then will the hands of all that are with thee be strong. So Alter explains this by saying, right, that if you go and sleep with your father's concubines, right, then everyone will know that there's no chance that there will be any there'll be no rapprochement between you, right? No one will be able to sort of hedge and sort of say, okay, well, we're not really choosing sides. We're going to see how this all comes out, right? It's going to be, everyone will have to choose one or the other, right? You're going to choose David or you're going to choose Absalom because they can never be reconciled, right? This is one of the worst things that a person can do, right? I guess a man, right? The worst thing a man can do is to sleep with one of his father's concubines, right? Or wives, whatever it is. You know, in this kind of a society, right? Powerful men had multiple wives, right? So, and probably some of those wives were not much older than some of the sons. So you can sort of imagine that this was not an uncommon temptation, right? And so but the fact that here it's going to happen, right? My guess would be, right, that the women in question are probably not David's age; they're probably more Absalom's age. So this would, go ahead, Connie.
It's interesting, though, that the text makes a big deal out of the fact that David left these concubines.
Yes.
We didn't have to hear about it. He didn't have to the writer didn't have to mention it, but it was a foreshadowing, wasn't it? It was definitely foreshadowed, right? I mean, the text, it's very interesting how, it's very interesting how it's mentioned, right, so often in this narrative, right? We are prepared, so to speak, for what will happen, right? So David decides to leave 10 concubines to take care of the house. Why do we need to know that?
right? Why doesn't he just leave men servants, right?
So we know they're set up for the next guys coming along.
Of course, right? It's a setup, right? It's a setup. But it's interesting, right? Because as Connie says, it doesn't necessarily need to be set up, right? We could have very easily not had that line in chapter 15, right? And then gotten to chapter 16 and been informed by Achitophel, so said Absalom to Achitophel, give your counsel what we should do. And Achitophel said unto Absalom, you know that your father left 10 concubines, right? And so go sleep with them, right? And it would have been, we wouldn't have, the reader wouldn't have known. But I do think, right, that the reason that we get this a lot here, and I do think that part of it, right, is a feature of the kind of text this is, right? Which is it's a text that's read and reread and reread and reread, right? So that this is so the next time we read chapter 15, right, and we get to the part about the concubines, right, we will be reminded, oh yes, what happens in chapter 16, right? Is okay, that, so it ends up being so the experience of reading, right, is not the author is aware, right, that the way that we read these texts is not like we don't read this book like a whodunit, right? We've read it. Oh, have you ever read 10 Little Indians? Oh yeah, I read that book. I don't need to read it again because I know what happens, right? That's not the way the Bible works, right? We read the Bible again and again and again, right? And so we can enjoy, these little clues that are put in. Yeah, go ahead, David.
Are we supposed to be flummoxed by this, or, are we supposed to not be able to grasp it completely? That's why we have to go over it again and again?
No, I don't think so. No, I think the reason that we go over it again and again, right, is because these are the stories of our ancestors, right? The stories of our these are. It's sort of like the I pull this out too much, right? But it's sort of like these stories are sort of like the Iliad and the Odyssey, right? We don't go to read the Iliad because we don't know what happens to Troy, right? We don't go and read the Odyssey, right? Because we wonder whether or not Odysseus is going to make it home, right? We read it because of the beauty of the text, right? And because these are heroes that still have their stories still have resonance in our lives. Yeah, go ahead, David.
Well, this is just exactly the same kind of thing that happens.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because it's something that moves us.
Right. And I think that, David, this is the first time you've been, excuse me one second. This is the first time you've joined us, but one of the interesting things about contemporary liberal Jewry, right? And actually I would love your perspective on this, David, because I don't know what this is like in the Christian world. I don't actually remember reading the Bible very much at all when I was in going to church as a kid. But in the modern liberal Jewish world, right, we read the Torah, pretty faithfully. We read the Torah every week, and so, with any luck, we'll read most of the Torah. We'll read it, over the course of a year or a couple of years, depending on where we are. But we don't tend to read the other books of the Bible with the same regularity, right? So we don't revisit these stories in an organized way. We can do it on our own, right? We can do it in classes like this, right? But we don't just, as a matter of course, reread these stories. And I think, and I'm just being, this year I've just been reminded week after week of how amazing this is, and how worth it is to read it, as disturbing, of course, as it can be from time to time. The stories, obviously, like many human stories, are really upsetting. This being one of them, right? That they spread Absalom a tent upon the top of the house, right? And this is the top of the house where he first saw Bathsheba, right, which set all these events into motion, right? And he had sex with all of them, right, in the sight of all Israel. Now, of course, we could say, Dodi and Connie, you were asking about this, right? It's not necessary, right, that it happened all in one afternoon, right? It could have been over the course of 10 days, right? It could have, there's no specific time designation given here, but there, in this little piece, right? Although the next piece we're going to look at suggests that this is happening pretty quickly, right? That the pace of events is pretty quick, right? So now here is Achitophel, right? So his counsel, right, was like the word of God, right? Bidvar Elohim, right? So everyone wanted his counsel because it was like talking to God, like talking to God. Go ahead, Anne.
Well, we have been enjoined to teach these things to our children.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And it's very interesting, right? That this is an event in my own life that's been emblazoned on my memory as sort of a cautionary tale, I guess. Is when my kid was in kindergarten, we signed him up for Hebrew school at a big urban synagogue in Boston, and we were there for the orientation, and the director of education was sort of describing the program, and this young man, obviously also the father of a kindergartner, raised his hand and said, but you're not going to teach them Bible stories, are you? And the poor woman had to kind of say, well, it is a Jewish, Sunday school. It's, we're supposed to be teaching them about Judaism, and the Bible is a big part of the big part, But I mean, again, I think, I wouldn't have known what to say to her at that point, but to him at that point. But I mean, at this point, I would, if I were in her shoes, I would say, look, not just, that we're supposed to teach it to our children, right? But these are stories that are deeply embedded in our culture, and everyone should know these stories, not just Jews. Go ahead, Ann.
Supposed to teach them to swim as well.
Yes, exactly. 100%. You need to teach to swim. All right. All right, good. So,
Jody would like to ask you something.
go ahead.
Oh, I just want to know, so now we are to assume that this is the end of the chapter, and that it's telling us that the situation that's just occurred with the concubines has had the effect that it was supposed to have.
That is a great question, Dodi. I would assume so, right? Because of the way that the text sort of sets up Achitophel as being really shrewd and knowing what's what. And so I think we are given to understand that if Achitophel makes a suggestion, right, that it's a pretty good suggestion, and that what he predicts we can accurately presume will happen. And I think so this is, we were just talking about the 10 concubines being left behind in chapter 15 so that Avshalom can sleep with them in chapter 16, right? And now we have, we're being set up that Achitophel is never wrong when he makes a suggestion, right? And that's going to set us up for the next chapter, right? Which is, right? Achitophel making another suggestion, right? He says to Avshalom, right? Give me, right? Let me have 12,000 men, and I'm going to get up and go after David right now. So this is why I think we can assume, right, that Avshalom, shall we say, took care of all 10 of the concubines in one afternoon, right? Because Achitophel, as soon as Avshalom is done, says, all right, I want to go pursue David right now, right? This night, right? Halayla, right? And I will come upon him when he is weary and weak-handed, and I will make him afraid, and all the people that are with him will flee, and I will smite the king only. Right? Achitophel is very shrewd, right? He figures, David probably does not have a strong connection with all the people that are with him, and it'll be easy enough. They're going to be downhearted enough so that I can, I will go and kill just the king, and then I will bring back all the people, and when they have returned, except for David, the man whom you seekest, everyone will be at peace. Right? So we'll kill the head, right, and save the body, right, and bring the body back to you, and they will all serve you, right? And this saying pleased Avshalom well and the elders of Israel. So everyone thought this was a great plan, right? But Avshalom says, now call Hushai, right? And we'll see what he has to say, right? So now Hushai, so notice, right? So these little S's, right, basically mean a break in the text in the scroll, right? So we see from the beginning, right, of chapter 17, right, to this break in the text, right, is how long? It's 4 verses, right? Achitophel goes right to the point. And I think if I'm not wrong, which I'm often wrong, so don't trust me, right? The previous break, right, was the council, right? The P is also a break. I don't know what the difference is between a P and an S, but these are breaks in the, so there was a break.
Authors.
I'm sorry?
I said they're different authors.
That's what I thought.
Oh, no, I don't think so. I don't think they're different authors. I think it's a different kind of break. I think that one of them means that there's like a break, but the text picks up in the same line. And the other one means that it's a break and the text picks up in the next line. But I don't know which is P and which is S. But anyway, but there's a P here. So there's a break here, right? That begins the council, right? And Achitophel's council is 1 verse, right? And then we get the report of what happened, right? Now, the next one, right? Achitophel, right? His whole council is 3 verses, right? And then we get 1 verse of reaction, right? And then we say, okay, so then said Avshalom, call him, right? And Hushai came and Achitophel said this, right? Now say what you think, right? And Hushai said unto Avshalom, the counsel that Achitophel has given this time is not good, right? Bapa'am hazot. Right? Usually Achitophel's counsel is great, right? And this actually might be good counsel in a different situation, but right now it's not so good, right? And Alter points out, and this is really interesting, one thing I've learned from reading this, right, is that you only you only have vayomer, right, when someone begins speaking, right? So if it's a continuous speech, right, there's no vayomer, right? There's no he said, right? It just continues. So if you have another vayomer, right, which you have here, that means that there was some sort of break, right? And he says that what basically the way it works is in a conversation, right? If someone says something, there's an expectation that the other person will respond. But here, Avshalom doesn't respond. And so when Hushai starts talking again, it's signaled with a Vayomer Hushai. Okay, so now, and I'm just gonna, we don't have time to get into all of Hushai's advice, but I'm just gonna point out, right, how long does it go, right? It goes, right? And they're all very long verses, right? 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, right? So it's endless, right? In biblical terms, this is like an hour-long speech, right? No one talks a long time in the Bible. So you know when a person has a very long speech, you know something is up, right? So very interesting. But it's what ends up happening, right, is that Avshalom decides that he likes Hushai's version better than Achitophel's, right? Which is going to have all kinds of consequences that we will discuss next week. All right. So for next week, let's do 17, at least 17 and 18. We'll try to read a little bit more. We'll try to go a little faster, but it's hard because there's so much interesting stuff going on in these things. Go ahead, David.
What time do you meet? Mondays at 7?
At 7. Always Mondays at 7. And David, do you have Alter's translation?
No, I don't.
All right, so let me see what I can do, because there were several people who signed up to be part of this class, but they haven't followed through on it. So if I can obtain from them, if I can borrow one of the books from them, I'll get it to you if you're interested.
Great, that'd be great.
All right, phenomenal. All right, thank you, everybody. Until next week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a great week. We'll talk soon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rabbi Jim.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Oh, baby Solomon has a name.
Yes.